lot of it has to do with the direction that you see the company going in, and the direction that you see yourself going in.
In hindsight, I would have preferred never to have taken over that job because it was a thankless job. And regardless of who was going to be CEO, the company was not going to survive.
The 6 months that shook the Evans Fur Company.
So it was all about building trust and relationship. It was the manufacturers, I'm sure, that, I don't want to say pushed.
But start and tell us with where we are in time and what you're doing at about the time that... Do you mind if we walk around your place a little bit and show people how that looks?
No, okay. Absolutely. So... Okay.
Hi, everybody. I'm Scott. Thanks for joining me again today for another episode of the podcast in support of the film, Skin on Skin, The Rise and Fall of the World's Largest Furrier.
And I looked at him and I said, where are you putting the fur?
What made him think that he could come in and turn this place around? It was so much more than what he was trying to do.
All I know is that, Larry wanted my job and had been sniping at me.
Absolutely not. I mean, okay, so I was the merchandise manager. I had been I was in 5 different positions.
And, it was real clear to me that blood was thicker than water and that wasn't going to be a possibility.
Everybody was just such milquetoast.
It was when Evans was starting to run low on cash, so there wasn't any money to do any remodeling.
He really just was opposed to the whole notion of family being involved in the business.
And I go, that man's going to ruin this company. With that attitude, you just don't go in and say, I know better, because you don't know shit.
So friends, that's a recap of what brings us to where we are here. The start of season 2 of the podcast in support of the film Skin on Skin, The Rise and Fall of the World's Largest Furrier, Part 2. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Scott. Great to see you again. Welcome to the season finale of season 1 of the podcast in support of the film Skin on Skin, The Rise and Fall of the World's Largest Furrier. Today, we've got another deep dive planned for you. We're going to take a look at the Meltzer, who you probably think you know the least, the Meltzer male child of the 6 children of Rose and Julius Meltzer. However, you know a lot more about him than you think you know. And that would be my great uncle, Bernie Meltzer, Bernard D. Meltzer, who has quite a resume, such a resume that rather than repeat it here myself, I'm going to let my lifelong friend, Michael Idlis, show you how it's done. And this is from the film Skin on Skin, The Rise and Fall of the World's Largest Furrier, Part 2.
Bernard D. Meltzer, Bernie to those who knew him. I mean, I don't know where to begin, man. It's almost kind of intimidating just reciting the resume of a most important man and mind in the worlds of law, politics, and the world order of the 20th century. Bernie Meltzer was the step-up man, the one Meltzer who always seemed to be there for everyone else in the family while making them all proud of his own accomplishments at the same time. He may have been the baby boy, but his international renowned prowess surmounted that of even older brother A.L. Overcompensating as his reaction to the abandonment he felt from his parents? You be the judge of that for yourself. But here's the professional Skinny, the abbreviated version. Assistant to Secretary of State Dean Acheson, Nuremberg prosecutor, leading labor law scholar, a distinguished service professor emeritus at the University of Chicago Law School, special assistant to SEC Chairman Jerome Frank. After failing a physical, he was still commissioned as a naval officer and assigned to the OSS, the precursor to the CIA. Because, well, you'd want Bernie Meltzer there, wouldn't you? Not enough? When World War II ended, yes, it was Bernie Meltzer who was assigned to assist in the drafting of the United Nations Charter. Now you can see why I'm intimidated just talking about the guy.
So, Bernie Meltzer was the youngest son of the 6 children of Rose and Julius Meltzer. He was mostly raised by my grandmother, Thelma Meltzer Sussman, because my great-grandmother, Rose Meltzer, came to America, had trouble adjusting, and basically went to bed to stay there. And that's all discussed and explored in the first film, Skin on Skin, The Rise and Fall of the World's Largest Furrier. And what came out of all of this was the older boys, Herman and A.L., left school and went to work to be able to support the entire family, since my great-grandfather, Julius, had trouble adjusting and making a living as well. And out of all of that came the Evans Fur Company. The younger boys, my great-uncles Jack and Bernie, were thus afforded the opportunity to go to law school, get great educations, and pursue dreams and fields in that vein. And we just showed you how successful my great-uncle Bernie was, and that's what we're going to deep dive into today. But before we go any further, let me show you the official trailer to the film, Skin on Skin, The Rise and Fall of the World's Largest Furrier.
Who doesn't love a rags to riches story? But a rags to riches to collapse story?
There were 2 Evans furs. The one that climbed to the top of the highest peak, amazing story, and the one that tumbled from that peak decades later. But that's not the tragedy. The tragedy is what happened in between.
They lived the American dream, and they let a lot of people come in and live it with them. And it was a wonderful story until it wasn't.
Coming from a generation that was so driven and willing to work 18 hours a day to be successful, there aren't that many people like that anymore.
They created something out of whole cloth, and he helped kings and queens around the world with their fur coats.
That was the era, I would say, the golden era of department stores and specialty stores.
Genetics loads the gun, but it's the environment that pulls the trigger.
Non-existent parenting, and so they didn't learn how to cope with stresses.
And I just look at the damage that my father created and the things that he has said.
But it certainly caused a significant rift in the family and families, and a number of us didn't communicate with each other for a long time.
You marry into the family, you marry into the business, because that is your life.
Clearly, there were problems.
So almost 25 years ago now, my great Uncle Bernie sat down with the students at the Justice Robert H. Jackson Center up in Jamestown, New York, near Buffalo. Justice Jackson was the chief prosecutor at Nuremberg that Uncle Bernie worked for during the trials. And he spoke about that experience, an amazing experience. a historical experience, something that shaped the second half of the 20th century. And in this first clip I want to show you, here's Uncle Bernie talking about victor's justice and balancing acts and all the things that were required to give a fair and honorable trial to people accused of some really horrible atrocities.
I'm not going to pretend to speak for Justice Jackson, but speaking only for myself, you've put your finger on the central difficulty of the trial. It was victor's justice. The choice was, of course, between victor's justice or no justice at all. And you put your finger on another aspect of law. In one sense, law is designed to restrain power. In the opposite sense, law cannot be enforced without power. Now, victor's justice was not the product of Nuremberg. Victor's justice was the product of a fragile, undeveloped system of international law. So in the end, the issue was victor's justice or no justice at all. Summary execution without a right to defend yourself, or no penalty at all, unless the German people followed the Italians. You know what happened to Mussolini. And one of the purposes of the trial was to avoid the indiscriminate bloodbath that might have resulted if the anguish, disappointment of the German people had not been channeled into an orderly proceeding. So that I don't know what the answer would have been had the tables been reversed. My hunch is that the leaders of the defeated nations would not have had the luxury of a trial, that their disposition would have been summary execution. But you've pointed, as I said, at the fundamental difficulty, and it is one that will persist until we can develop institutions with enough power to deal out justice without regard to whether those in charge are victors or neutrals, and neutrals are never easy to find whenever there is war.
During that same talk, Uncle Bernie then went on to kind of bring it forward into the present, into the 21st century, discussing how terrorists today should be treated legally if they're being brought to justice.
If you have a trial, you presuppose the possibility of an acquittal. If you have a genuine trial, not a show trial, I think our alternatives, again, would be imperfect if we captured Osama alive. Now, for me, the happiest conclusion would be if Osama died an honorable death in battle. But if we capture him alive, we have said we would give him justice. And justice, particularly given the precedent of Nuremberg, implies a right to defend himself. So there are risks in a trial. And if Osama should be tried and acquitted, the increment to his prestige and power within the Muslim world would just be increased exponentially. And that is one of the risks. And if we think of the various kinds of trials and various participants, the question is, how do we achieve a fair trial and reduce the risk of a judgment or a dissent based not on the evidence, but based on values or political considerations that we would consider irrelevant, indeed illegitimate. And we can speculate about that. As I think I said earlier, the problem of how to handle the defendants was an acute one in connection with Nuremberg, and the British acquiesced in the trial only at a very late date. So I don't know how much time we have to ponder these issues.
Dad was smart, loyal to friends and family, loved the law, tried to compare everything to the law. Well, but in the law, it would be like this, and we would say, but this isn't the law.
He was the apple of my grandmother's eye. She pretty much raised the last 3 children, and she just adored him.
When I got older, I realized how, when I spoke with him, I better make sure I knew exactly what I wanted to say. I didn't need, and I was amazed by how measured he was with when he spoke.
And you couldn't have international justice without international treaties. And here's my great uncle Bernie discussing the importance of international treaties and getting everything to all align together so something like an international military tribunal, that like which we had at Nuremberg, could actually happen.
My position on the international treaty is that when you deal with issues of the kind that may come to a tribunal, those issues cannot be divorced from politics. I mean politics in the legitimate sense of the word. So I am sympathetic to the American position that wants the Security Council to have a hand in the inception of prosecutions. If you can get the unanimous consent of the great powers, you can come closer to avoiding judicial proceedings that may disrupt a fragile peace, that may impair a geopolitical equilibrium, and so on.
You know, just a really, really nice man whose priorities were always in the right place and very ethical. Nothing he did was ever, you would never question anything.
But the story that I recall was the unions came in and always tried to unionize the company. And he would sit down with his contract and say, my contract's better than your contract. Why would my employees want to unionize? And I don't recall there ever being a union coming into Evans.
It was so much more than the people. It was the memory. It was the history. And that was so that there was somehow this wish, this desire to preserve it.
Then there's the question of, did the defendants at Nuremberg show any sort of remorse? And as you would guess, the answer is mixed.
Here again, it depended on which individuals. Speer showed remorse. Hans Frank, who had been Governor General of Poland and I think Attorney General at one time, I'm not sure, said something like this: 1,000 years will not erase the guilt of the Third Reich. I think the military on the whole felt they were being abused. And I don't know about the foreign minister. There are two really related questions. Did they feel remorse and did they show remorse? And obviously we could have a more objective notion of whether they showed remorse, but I saw them only in the dock. There were psychiatrists who dealt with them, and my recollection of their findings was that some of them showed remorse. Certainly, Goering was unrepentant to the very end. And Schock was not found guilty, but he thought that one of the gravest abuses was to have put him in the prisoner's dock. So you had a whole variety of reactions depending in part on the role and the actual as distinguished from the admitted knowledge of the defendants concerning the atrocities that were exposed by the evidence at Nuremberg.
I think there was a level of acceptance and assuredness that the company had that made people feel comfortable there. And people really devoted their lives to it. People stayed there forever.
I idolized him for his brilliance, for his ability to be with people, and he just mixed with everybody.
My understanding was that he was a trusted advisor to his brothers, and as an outsider per se, I think he was able to be a real voice of reason.
Personally, love watching shows and movies that fictionalize alternate realities about a post-World War II world in which Hitler possibly had won. But what about a reality and a world in which the war ended the way it ended, but instead of Hitler committing suicide, he was brought to justice?
Oh, I think he would have been the key defendant. And then I think we would have gotten more press coverage. Yes, indeed.
Would it have caused the nightmare, Professor, had he won?
I don't know. It's hard to tell. By that time, he was distraught. By that time, look what happened to Germany. Look what happened to his dreams, which were the nightmares for the rest of them. And he might have thought, what did he have to lose if he defended? He would have gone back to Versailles, and he would have blamed it all on the Allies.
Loved solving problems. Was very supportive to his siblings. Tried to take care of legal problems, help them with financial advice, and was there for them.
Kind of the legacy that he left in two regards, being a prosecutor at Nuremberg trials, as well as his involvement in the creation of the UN Charter. And given what the UN has become over the last 20 or 30 years, how upset I think Uncle Bernie would be at the direction the UN has taken.
I'm sure he read a lot of horrors when he was there, but I don't know how that affected him.
You know, Uncle Bernie was a great advocate of rights for all people. He didn't have a prejudiced bone in his heart, and he mingled and socialized with people from all walks of life, ethnically, racially, economically, socially, etc. He was great in that regard. And one of the things he would definitely admonish one for, which he spoke about at this talk, would be lumping people into a group, such as, you know, lumping all Germans into the group with those that committed these atrocities.
Very difficult here, perhaps wrong to lump the German people together as if they were a single entity. There were all kinds of Germans. There were some Germans who took enormous risks to help save Jews or gypsies and so on. Some that gloried in the Nazi attack on minorities. And there's some folks, of course, have condemned the German people as if they were a single entity. Mr. Goldhagen's book has taken that position, and he has been met with a considerable amount of criticism. The one thing that Justice Jackson tried to do was to make it clear we were not indicting the entire German people. He understood that thugs had taken over the government, and it took a lot of courage to resist. There were some resistors, but most Germans went along as best they could.
All of his grandchildren wrote reports on Nuremberg at some point in school. They always, someone would always have an assignment, interview some relative about something. And I think they all wrote some paper, whether it was 3rd grade or 6th grade or high school, at some level about their grandfather and the Nuremberg trials.
I have clients like that who were like so smart as kids. They're still really smart. But if they haven't achieved some great success by the time they're 30, they feel like failures. They just feel like failures. I mean, I look at them and I go, wow, you're doing great. You're so smart. Have so much. But to them, it's never enough because they were built up to believe they could, control the world.
I've got one more amazing clip to show you, but before I do that, I'm going to give you a look at the second film, Skin on Skin, The Rise and Fall of the World's Largest Furrier Part 2, which is in production now.
Those Meltzer kids obviously weren't taught how to cope or how to parent or relationship skills were really lacking, and that got passed down.
DNA really plays a role in anyone's well-being, physical and or mental health.
All I know is that he had a photographic memory. He was brilliant, and the family loved him. Everybody in the family loved him, and it was an absolute shock.
Yeah, I think she loved the way I looked, so she was always, like I was her little doll. But she was very interesting and fun and vivacious.
All of his grandchildren wrote reports on Nuremberg at some point in school. Someone would always have an assignment, interview some relative about something.
Nonchalantly would toss a question out, and the beads of sweat were pouring off as he's trying to answer Uncle Bernie's question.
A lot of people live in fear that, oh my God, is that going to happen to me? So if they get depressed and they don't have the tools to handle their depression, what is their model?
In the end, a lot of people got hurt. A lot of customers got hurt, and it was just a bad thing. Just a bad thing.
Not for nothing, we were supposed to be lifers. You know what I mean? We were following, that suit.
And he asked these guys a bunch of questions, and then he threw this dinosaur. I'll never forget it. He threw this dinosaur, toy dinosaur, on the table, and he says, "This is what Evans is." And you know what happened to these dinosaurs?
He didn't want to be associated with the failure. And I think that he just wanted to detach, because that wasn't what the legacy that he wanted for himself.
He didn't want to wake up and smell the coffee, so he just, he did the things that he enjoyed doing. Especially people who were in the finance side, they were dealing with trying to put out fires every single day and trying to get enough money into the business to be able to pay the bills.
It was a very unique era of what turned out to be the youthquake, a youth boom, all kinds of innovation, new music, new everything.
So that is their legacy, and it's tragic. And these were people's lives and livelihoods. I remember when the stores closed, and Jeff and I got some calls, and people were just sobbing.
As things fell apart, that also became obvious. Well, they shut the doors on people. That was pretty high profile.
With brilliance comes depression.
Yep.
And there are also people who have done research on Eastern European Jews who there's, depression runs through.
A fish has got to swim and an eagle's got to soar. That's their natural temperament and how they want to live and how they want to play. And when that's blocked, people are really unhappy.
So friends, I'm going to let them play us out with this fabulous clip of Uncle Bernie assessing the brilliance of his boss at the trials, Justice Robert H. Jackson. But before I do that, I want to thank you for spending these past 20 episodes, over 12 hours of analysis and digging deep into the people, places, things, and events of the Evans Fur Company between 1929 and its demise in 1999, and the way it is all memorialized, along with the story of the Meltzer family, in my personal documentary film, Skin on Skin, The Rise and Fall of the World's Largest Furrier. So until we meet again for Season 2, I want to thank you for joining me all this time, and I hope you enjoyed going deeper into the film that is at the core of my current project in my heart. Have a great day. I'm Scott. We'll see you again real soon when we start Season 2.
In the upper left-hand corner is Prosecutor Bernard Meltzer. This is the prosecutor's table. Bernard Meltzer prosecuted Walter Funk. He took part in drafting the laws that deprived German Jews of their economic right. In 1938, he was named Minister of Economics, and in 1939, President of the Reichsbank. It was in the vaults of the Reichsbank that the Allies found 72 carloads of gold teeth taken from the mouths of murdered concentration camp inmates. Bernard explains his reaction to the opening statement by Justice Robert Jackson.
The Chief Prosecutor for the United States of America.
The privilege of opening the first trial in history for crimes against the peace of the world imposes a grave responsibility. The wrongs which we seek to condemn and punish have been so calculated, so malignant, and so devastating that civilization cannot tolerate their being ignored, because it cannot survive their being repeated.
Just magnificent.
I mean, we know it is now.
Nobody's a murderer, but it laid the foundation. You see, you got to remember, the Americans had the conspiracy count.
Right.
So the Americans could wander over the whole field. And Jackson really gave in thumbnail the history of the regime and the oppressions and so on. And you know, had wonderful phrases. In a way, one hated to cannibalize the talk by quoting a few excerpts, but there's that wonderful statement of 4 nations flushed with victory, or so on. Subordination of power to reason, or so. But it was just. It was electric. It was electric.
I also remember having a Thanksgiving with Uncle Bernie about 3 years after I graduated college. And my roommate from my freshman year of college was now a first-year law student at Northwestern and joined us. And his name was Noah. Noah did not eat a lick during Thanksgiving because Uncle Bernie, in his inevitable fashion, was just eating away and nonchalantly would toss a question out at Noah. And the beads of sweat were pouring off of Noah as he's trying to answer Uncle Bernie's questions.
And then as I got older, he became much more attuned to us and me to him. And he'd come over for dinner much more, and another brilliant mind and a wonderful sense of humor. And he's just a nice man.
There was more than one time when Uncle Bernie had to step up and take charge. The first being after Uncle Jack's death. Bernie stepped up and became the law stud that they all said that Jack was going to be. It happened again decades later after A.L. died, and Bernie stepped up and became the patriarch of the family, taking care of everybody's finances and legal needs and advice. I mean, he was the conduit for everybody in the family.